So you can see the ancient mindset of they actually had a concept of the grasp of the gospel and the restoration of all things that would come from the coming of the one who was to restore all things. And that coming of the one was the Messiah, the Mashiach, the Son of God, the King himself. And by the way, he's also the one who created everything in the beginning. So that's why he gave his life for all creation. He can restore all creation. So these kingship image, this kingship concepts are just they're very profound in terms of the way that they explain or give insight into the gospel. And of course, this is it's the battle over the king. Who's the rightful king of the world? That's what Daniel is explaining, right? So in Daniel chapter 10, for example, Daniel is talking. The angel talks to Daniel about how the prince of Persia withstood him for 21 days, and the kingdom of Greece is coming, but none held with him except Michael the prince, right? So you see this conflict between the prince the prince of heaven, the king of heaven, and then you see the king conflict between him and the kings of this earth, or those who claim to have dominion over this earth. And of course, the one who claims dominion is Satan himself, but of course he always claims dominion through his puppets, whatever puppet it happens to be at the time. So the conflict is between the kingdom of God, represented by Christ, and his bride, and then of course you have the beast and his bride, or you have Satan and his bride, however you want to say it. So this idea of going up to worship the king and paying tribute and bowing down to the king, that's why you can see in many places in Scripture, Revelation 13, for example, it talks about worshiping the dragon, and then it talks about worshiping the beast, and then it talks about the beast from the earth creates the image of the beast, and then everybody has to bow down to worship the image of the beast. Well, what are you worshiping? Are you worshiping the dragon? Are you worshiping the beast? Are you worshiping the image of the beast? Well, it's all the same thing. It's the kingdom of Satan, right? And it's under the kingship. Actually, the kingship in that scenario is the beast. So yeah, and this is where the idea of tribute comes in. If you remember, there's only really two places in the Bible that use the 666 number. I mean, actually, it's in many places when you look at the imagery. But if you look up the 666 number, you remember that the first time it's used in the Bible when it says 666 actually goes back to Kings, and it deals with the gold that was given to Solomon by tribute. Remember, what is that? Second Kings. I don't have the text right in front of me, but what is this? Is it First Kings? Solomon's tribute. It talks about the amount of gold that he was brought to him in his tribute, and it was actually 666 talents of gold was brought to him. And so the idea is that they would go up to worship the king. They would bow down to Solomon, acknowledging him as their king, and then they would pay tribute, and that tribute was 666 talents of gold. So, Revelation picks up on this symbolism, this imagery in Revelation 13, and then when it describes the number 666. So actually the idea of worshiping the beast. So the idea is that you're going up and then you're worshiping the beast in his image, you're paying tribute, and that tribute is your worship, which means that you're acknowledging this beast, the dragon, and the image of the beast as your king, as your God. And of course, this is the conflict that's taking place, because in Revelation 12, there's a conflict between Michael and the dragon. And then Revelation 13, you have the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. And then Revelation 14, of course, the Lamb is standing on Mount Zion, and the number group is with him, and they're actually worshiping the Lamb, right? So you have this conflict. There's two kings that are claiming dominion of this world, and then the people have to choose, all that dwell on the earth have to choose who they bow down to. And that's the test that's coming to the whole world. Now we tend to focus on the day aspect, which is true, but the truth of the matter is that you're actually choosing, you're actually worshiping him who is your king. So that's where the imagery comes from. And this is the imagery that Daniel's been picking up on. Daniel's been explaining throughout the book of Daniel that Revelation picks up on. Does that make sense? So the appointed times that Daniel keeps talking about, or these events that Revelation are describing, are actually connected to this coronation, inauguration, renewal of the covenant with the king that is taking place. And of course, there's a process of that king coming, and then every group is challenged with the revelation of the king, and then the choice to either bow down and worship or to reject him. And then, of course, the same revelation goes to the next group, and then it goes to the next group. That's the same thing you see going on in the book of Acts. So that's what I was trying to share last week, and I was hoping that maybe you went spend some time and go through Daniel, and you look at each chapter and you begin to realize how they're connected to this event. Um, as again, as I've mentioned in many other places in the Bible, you can see the same process. The book of Esther is a wonderful, wonderful way to describe it because you see it in Persia. But all these kingdoms function the same way. And by the way, this is the question. This gives you insight into the question in the New Testament. Remember, they were talking to Jesus, should we pay tribute to Caesar or not? And so really what they're asking is this idea, well, if I pay tribute to Caesar, then am I not acknowledging Caesar as my king and my God? And that's where Jesus begins to challenge them that, you know, what what is give to Caesar what is Caesar and give to God's what is God's, right? Because they were asking for this coin with Caesar's face on it, and that's why Jesus says, "Show me the coin. Whose image?" It's very interesting. He asks, "Whose image?" When you look at Revelation 13, the image, in Revelation 14, 144,000 are the image of the Lamb. In Revelation 13, the question is about the image of the beast. And so Jesus asks for the coin and asks whose image is on the coin. And he's not saying that you're worshiping Caesar. He's saying that whatever your character or whatever image your character reflects, that's who you're worshiping, which is really really profound, right? So in Daniel 11, for example, to bring it to our day, you see we don't usually call them kings, but it's the governing philosophy of the culture. Like we're seeing a swing in our culture from the king of the south, that philosophy, that mindset that governs people. We're seeing that the swing in the philosophy from the king of the south to the king of the north. And the idea is that many were paying tribute to the king of the south, and now the king of the north is in ascendancy, and now there's a struggle about what philosophy is actually the ruling philosophy. And so you
Well,
see the same type of struggle going on.
Trump called himself king.
Yeah, and the truth is he is. I mean,
Yeah,
he is.
here.
And by the way, you see the impact that he's having all over the world.
Oh,
By the way,
yeah.
it's the same thing that the woke culture was trying to do. I mean, we're talking about the money stuff, but you see Biden pumping billions of dollars all over the world so that people can be taught, gender stuff, and they can have sex changes in these other countries. Well, why are we doing that? Well, because the king of the South is using the wealth to influence others to come under his philosophical ideas. So he gives billions of dollars to these other countries for sex changes and all this other stuff. Well, what's that got to do? What's that got to do with America? Well, it has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the King of the South philosophy that he's trying to get the whole world to bow down to him. And sadly enough, most people, if you pay them enough money, they'll cave in. What you're seeing is the war between the king of the North and the king of the South. But of course, the Bible tells us the transition in the philosophy is necessary for Satan to prepare himself, because he's actually going to combine the king of the north and the king of the south are going to come together to fight against the true king. And so this you see this transition. Um, the king of the south always results in chaos, and there has to be this tyrant, or this king of the north has to come and actually bring order and bring cohesiveness back. And that's why when we talk about, as Adventists, we talk about the papacy more than we talk about the king of the south and humanism. Of course, most Adventists don't even know the king of the south is humanism. That's how much we don't even talk about it, because we talk about the papacy, the religious people taking control of the government to push their agenda. That's the king of the north philosophy. Yeah, so it's actually amazing because, yeah, you or if you know what you're obviously you're seeing the Bible fulfilled right in front of you.
He's
Now they
wiping the
talk about
floor with
kings
them.
and kingdoms, and we're not used to kings and kingdoms, so we don't think most people don't even think anything's happening. But the truth is, if you're awake, then you realize that there's huge things happening. These are huge shifts that are taking place. This is not, you know, Donald Trump did not create this huge shift. This
And
is not this
and just like
doesn't come from one person.
Ellen White said that the last movements would be rapid ones. Could anybody believe that anything could change so fast since the time he got into like today? I mean, it's been devastating just watching the speed and the force at which it's been moving.
Oh yeah, right. And you could say the same. I mean, you could go back. You could go back to the COVID thing, or you could go back to whatever event you want to go back to, and you start looking at the huge shifts and huge movements that are taking place in social standards and the way people think and all these other things. The last few years have just been, you could say the last 10 years or whatever, 7 years, whatever would you want to choose. You go back and start looking at, there's just a whirlwind of changes that have swept through, things that you would never have believed could happen that fast in the short amount of time. And I think that, this is just, yeah, I mean, we're in this spiral, and this spiral is not going to end until Jesus comes. And things are going to keep going faster and faster, and these events are going to become more and more crazy to us, more and more out of sync with what we have known in the past as real. And that's part of the process of the end. There's a speeding up and a maturing of the process. And there has to be a speeding up and maturing of the process. It's not going to take 40 years. We don't have 40 years. So the process speeds up. As the process speeds up, it intensifies, and then the actions and reactions become more and more extreme. And that's how, by the way, the issues or the principles of the King of the North and the King of the South are actually made manifest when they become more extreme, which is obvious. Now I started talking about money because I was talking about the tribute to Solomon with the gold, right? It's the same idea though. The idea of what would be different in the ancient world is that you brought money to the king. The king didn't hand out money to get you to bow down. You gave him, so we're kind of backwards in what we're doing, sending money all over the world so we can teach people about 107 genders when there's no such thing, right? But anyway, that's just the insanity of the king of the South. But anyway, I just hoping that this simple kind of insight gives you understanding in terms of when you read the prophecies and rereading the book of Daniel with this king, the idea of this kingship and this appointed renewal of the covenant is just, I think it's just eye-opening.
Well, I keep having this repeated urge to text you and tell you to hurry up and finish teaching us, or this is going to be all over with before we even finish studying it, because it's just coming so fast.
Well, the neat thing is, Gene, is it's not going to be all over with because we're going to see the whole thing again. Only now, that next time we're going to see it rightly. because we're going to be with the king, and we're going to go up with our tribute on a yearly basis to worship our king, and we're going to receive the gift of life, and we're going to see this over and over. And then, of course, at his third coming, we'll see the whole thing reenacted again, right? So what's cool about it is that it's not something that we're going to learn and then have to not worry about. It's something we're going to learn, and we're going to practice for all eternity.
Well, it's a
And
very
there will never be a time when we don't want to go up and worship our king.
very interesting time to be alive, is all I can say.
Yeah. Well, and this is why I mentioned this to you before, but in Revelation 10, remember at the end of Revelation 10, it says prophesy again about nations and tribes, languages, and kings. And this idea of prophesying about the kingship was that the kingship was the basis of the ancient economy, the ancient world, the way their culture ran. It all surrounded the king, and the more you look at it, the more you think about it, the more you begin to realize how foundational this is to to these cultures, and you begin to understand what God is actually saying through the prophecies of the Bible. I just find it very profound. I just find it very insightful.